The YouTube video you are about to see is an account of one gamer's spiral into madness from purchasing microtransactions for a multiplayer video game littered with bugs and a small player base. It is all the more tragic in that he has no friends he plays with. But if they had friends to queue with, it would not have prepared them for the countless insane sleepless nights and tortuous hours spent playing Lobby Simulator in each patch update. For them, a simple asymmetric horror game from the Xbox Game Pass would turn into an obsession that consumed his life. It would alienate them from the opposite sex and push their loved ones away as they fell into catatonia. This is the review that individual mayor for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game.
In 1973, two young directors, Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel, connected and began working on a low-budget horror film. So low budget, in fact, they wore multiple hats during the production of the film. Tasks like composing, directing, screenwriting, writing, and even camera work ultimately fell upon Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel during the process. This film would go down in the annals of modern-day American horror films and influence what we know as the modern-day slasher. You may know it as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. While the idea of a slasher villain killing unsuspected victims might sound generic, at the time, Texas Chainsaw was a bit of a pioneer in this type of storytelling. Even when compared to a large library of films that are similar to Texas Chainsaw, there still remains a fresh and unique take in terms of its style and approach to the actual genre. For starters, adding an element that the movie would be somewhat of a reenactment of a true crime along with hinting at supernatural forces was something that was never really seen before and oftentimes is not replicated in the way that Texas Chainsaw did. This ultimately, though, became the blueprint for a lot of Western slasher films that you're familiar with nowadays. Without Texas Chainsaw, there would have been no Friday the 13th, no Terrifier, and arguably no Saw films. Not to go too much into detail on the movie itself, however, what's really impressive by today's standards even is that Texas Chainsaw still finds a way to rival the shock and awe of modern-day slashers, showing a minimal amount of blood and guts and opting more for a grounded and genuine approach to its horror and terror that it brings. Texas Chainsaw tends to lean more in the realm of a slow, gradual, realistic but bizarre tone. Oftentimes, this pushes a sense of realism that indoctrinates a lot of viewers into believing what's happening on the screen did actually occur or could have occurred. Personally, what makes me the most tense about this movie is being haunted by the imagery. Oftentimes, what I find the most tense about these movies is imagining what happens after the camera stops rolling. What is Leatherface like before and after this movie? Weeks before, days before, months before? Who else has Leatherface come in contact, and what are those stories like? Like I said, I don't want to harp on the film too much, as I could talk about it for hours on end, and on top of that, there's already thousands of hours of YouTube videos and podcasts discussing this movie ad nauseum. Many film critics and scholars have already dissected this movie in every which way, for its thematic elements, for its camera work, as well as its storytelling and pacing, adding a whole layer of depth to the world that Texas Chainsaw inhabits. I never really noticed this, but small details like the old cars being behind the house, and some certain set design elements add an entirely new layer of fear for audience members to think about and mull over after their viewing, essentially making a lot of the horror entirely based on implications and what you're imagining. The questions you ask yourself based on those implications, only to unravel the mystery of Texas Chainsaw in your head, is what makes this movie so terrifying. Personally, what I find the most impressive about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even after all these years, is that every time I watch it, there's a new thing to be creeped out or disturbed by. Even after my second, third, 5th, 10th viewing, there's always one little detail that nags at me and haunts me a bit like a nightmare. Texas Chainsaw went on to be a huge commercial success and basically is one of the first indie horror movies to smash the box office. It would later go to be recognized in the film community by winning awards at European film festivals and also being shown in theaters for its 50th anniversary. And like all horror movies, of course, that are a huge success, sequels followed. Even with veterans of the original film being part of some of those other sequels, each subsequent film never really seemed to capture the pure essence of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Don't get me wrong, some of those sequels are a lot of fun and have bright spots to them and qualities that fans enjoy. Specifically talking about the direct sequel from Tobe Hooper himself, that one went more in a direction of a horror comedy, a la Evil Dead 2. It's very cartoonish, funny, and ups the gore factor in impressive ways, but ultimately none of that movie and other movies afterwards never captured the original dread and macabre atmosphere that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre had. I personally don't mind most of the sequels, however, I don't necessarily consider them to be truly canon to the first film. In the madness of creating TCM, it seems that they were able to capture lightning in a bottle with that first movie, but never really seemed to strike that chord again. It just doesn't seem like it's possible to do that over again with another movie somehow. Let me ask you something, though. What if instead of a movie, we tried a different approach? What if we tried everyone's favorite, an asymmetrical horror video game? So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game is an asymmetric multiplayer horror experience like no other. You have several options of playing this game, however, I really want to focus more on the main game. I may circle back to the rush mode that was added fairly recently, and we can even do more of a deep dive on the museum mode if people are interested in that. Essentially, what we have here, in my opinion, is the scariest multiplayer video game and the truest expansion of the original film's story and world in the form of a prequel, fleshing out the events, themes, and characters that took place in the film by allowing you to interact and see the world Texas Chainsaw inhabits through the eyes of either one of the killers or some of the victims. The main story of this game follows Maria Flores and her friends, who go looking for her after she went missing from camping in the Texas countryside. It's revealed that Maria Flores was captured by the family of cannibals and has been held captive or is hiding somewhere from them for some time. The story is not as direct as the movies. However, I think that adds to its strength as a video game. Each round is essentially your own version of the canon event that occurred within this story of these characters. Technically speaking, the developers of this video game do have a canon event in mind, but the actual playing of the video game allows gamers to generate their own narrative and sequence of events that leads to the victims escaping or, unfortunately, being brutally murdered. Gun Media stays very true to the source material of that franchise that it chooses to work with, and generally tries to make their games more of a horror simulation and not a competitive multiplayer experience. That design philosophy of simulating the source material for TCM in terms of characters, even the downloadable content, settings, and the overall mechanics of the game feels firmly cemented in the actual world of Texas Chainsaw. I know that might drive some people away from playing this game. However, I find that not necessarily focusing on the competitive play style, but more allows for gamers to develop their own style to play the match as they see fit to have the most fun. Whether it's goofing around, trying to stealth past enemies, or being very aggressive in hunting down or tormenting your family opponents. The ultimate goal of this game is definitely to be as true to the source material as possible in every step of the way. To break the gameplay down to brass tacks, you either choose to play as someone from the family, which is essentially the killer's side. This consists of characters like Leatherface, Sissy, Cook, and a few others. As the family, your objective is to kill victims and then collect their blood or blood that's scattered around the map to feed Grandpa. Grandpa ultimately then acts as a sonar, which makes it easier to hunt down and kill victims. On the victim side of things, you will stealth around each map, unlocking doors, powering fuse boxes, and turning off generators and batteries to escape the map in the clutches of the evil cannibal family. Some of these abilities are for generating space away from the killers by means of combat or just generally distracting them, and other abilities are ways to counter the killers and the traps that they set up. There are several options on how to escape each map, but there's also options around delaying killers, debuffing their abilities by stabbing Grandpa, or ways of hiding and escaping their clutches. For the record, I mainly play as the family. It tends to be the group that doesn't fill as quickly as victims do in matches. And as I said before, there are different styles and ways to play this game as you see fit. There are times when I've played stealthy as a family member and then surprised victims with several slashes of Sissy's blade, and then there are other times where I played as a victim and rendered Grandpa's sonar ability completely useless. Ultimately, though, there are some playstyles that are considered fairly meta, but you don't have to play that way. You can play as you see fit, and results can work heavily in your favor or to complete and horrifying disaster. In my opinion, I feel like the balancing weighs more towards the killer side of things. Typically, as a victim, when you lose a teammate, it makes it a lot harder to escape with one less pair of hands working on objectives like unlocking doors and turning valves or stabbing Grandpa. However, that's not to say that being a family member is an entire cakewalk. There have been times where I've been duped by a Leland whose main ability is to stun and slow down killers, while my teammates missed a whole horde of victims escaping right under their noses. I think the overpowered nature of the family, in my opinion, is by design, though, to keep the game tense and scary, and also true to the source material. That balancing act has been a bit of a challenge since the game's launch, but I really think it's come into its fullest self after several patches. Not to mention, it's a really unique dynamic to have teammates on the killer's side. This dynamic of having teammates on the killer's side makes it feel as if you're not entirely to blame for a loss, versus a game like Dead by Daylight, where you could be bullied by the victims simply because you've been outplayed one too many times. Regardless of which side you pick, overall, the tense moment-to-moment gameplay is palpable. As a killer, you truly get that sense of being a ruthless hunter, stalking and tormenting your prey. As a victim, hiding in the bushes and narrowly dodging a brutal death creates those clutch and tense situations that really add to the terror of the character you're playing as. But ultimately, the most terrifying thing in this game, in my opinion, is the atmosphere it brings. I'm going to take a few minutes to not talk here and just let the game kind of speak for itself in that regard. From the very dynamic soundscapes to the gorgeously strange and brutal environments, and God, the music. Creepy, bizarre, haunting music that only pumps your heart rate up when you're the last one standing. Each match allows for interesting situations to pop up, which gives a sense of dread the original film had. And again, the implication of what's happening, what's around you, is what freaks me out late in the night when I'm playing in the dark with my headphones on. I find that my mind races when I come across certain decorations of the map, or if you hear a teammate being slaughtered in the distance while you're trying to unlock a door or turn off a generator. Gun has essentially gone out of their way to make the game look and feel as immersive as possible. You may be controlling the character on the screen, but you're still helpless to watch them reach their inevitable fate. I also think it's just super cool that we get to see more of the original Texas Chainsaw world. I mean, it's such a cool little feature and aspect that you could see the whole family house now instead of just a handful of rooms that we saw in the movie. And they're recreated beautifully. Not to mention the attention to detail to create some of these other locations, such as the gas station, Nancy's house, and the abandoned mill, are all unique and original in their own way, but still stay very true to the source material of Texas Chainsaw. It's very believable that these other new additions, these other new characters, and other new locations feel like they're genuinely part of the original movie in every way, shape, and form, which is hard to believe after 50 years that they were able to achieve that. I know I might be in the minority of praising this game. At the time of its release, it seems it was shot down because of a lack of content. And even now, people rip on the fact that the community is not in the 6 digits of players. However, in my opinion, I think today there's plenty of content that warrants the $20 entry fee. And all the footage I've captured here has been in the past few weeks. There's still plenty of player lobbies to be filled and a myriad of platforms. I mainly play on the Xbox One and PC, but the footage you're seeing here is from the PC, of course. At most, I've maybe waited 10 minutes on a Monday night at midnight to play this game. I still think it's fairly likely you'll find a game fairly quickly. And as I mentioned before, with all these subsequent updates, a lot of the bugs and small hiccups that plagued this game on launch have been mostly smoothed over and overhauled in some way. But even after saying all that, I don't think this game is for everyone, much like the original movie. However, like the original movie, I think it's a game that people should at least try one time or watch someone else play on YouTube. I also think Gun's pretty smart about how they're marketing this game and selling this game as well. Oftentimes they have certain free weekends and potentially coming up. Oftentimes this game goes on sale fairly frequently and will have free weekends where people could try it out for the first time to see if they like it for a whole weekend or not. I'd say if you take one thing away from this video, it's definitely watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but to give this game a chance when it's on a free weekend or if it's heavily discounted. I think what blows me away the most about this game, though, is that I've ended up buying it twice at full price, and I don't really regret it. I've even bought a lot of the DLC, and ultimately, I just think it adds more and more to the experience for me personally. I normally never do that for most video games. I'm not the type of guy who buys skins off of Fortnite or, hats on TF2, but for some reason, I felt really compelled for Texas Chainsaw. I find that playing this game at times feels like you're almost performing a satanic seance of some kind. Gathering 6 other strangers to recreate the events of a grisly crime is what keeps me coming back each time to uncover more and more about that world and about the details of Texas Chainsaw. I'm not sure if anyone else has had this experience, but it's very reminiscent of going down a rabbit hole of a famous serial killer and their story. Deep down, you know it's horrifying and wrong to be this fascinated by something like that. But the more and more you peel back that scab, the more enticing it becomes. And each clue drags you deeper and deeper into that dark and haunting world. Actually, come to think of it, why have I never just Googled a bunch of videos that talk about theories or, stuff about this game? Surely fans have made a ton of content that's super cool to learn more about the world of Texas Chainsaw.
I know I got a hoe. I got a couple hoes that I might be able to.
You got hoes?
Yeah, what you looking for?
Well, we want you to be the hoe.
Yeah, I'm trying to have you be the hoe.
I don't touch none of that gay shit. You guys gotta get the fuck up out of here. It's not gay, dude.
That's not gay.